Hey, welcome to Flight Test. I'm Josh, and this is Josh.
Hi.
Now, obviously, Flight Test has been built around the electric hobby really more than anything else.
Electric, foam, things like that.
And electric is great because it's really opened up the hobby to more people. It's kind of simplified it.
It's cleaned up the hobby. You know, they're more reliable. It's easier to get in the air quicker. A few connections, you're off and running.
Yeah, but there's something great to be said about gassers.
Yes, there is.
It's like the real deal.
It is a real deal. And one thing we really want is we want our awesome community to be able to grow with the hobby, but also some things that may have been intimidating that we didn't want people to start with, we still want them to experience the benefits. And there's a lot of benefits to gas and glow. Now, Josh, you've even had a little bit of exposure to gas and glow motors from the past.
Very little, yeah. I flew a P-51.
Yeah, the progressive training system from Hangar 9.
And the Roadrunner as well.
And the Roadrunner. The Roadrunner was fun because that was actually a gas motor similar to what we're going to be talking about today. But we picked that up at a swap meet for like $85. So if you fall in love with this, you're going to see so many different airplanes that you can actually get very cheap because a lot of people are going to electric. Let's go ahead and talk about 6 quick tips for a successful gas experience. Now, this is in no way going to replace the manual. We always encourage you to read the manual, especially because every motor is going to be a little different. Each manufacturer is going to have their own way of setting it up. There is nitro, there is gas, but with this specifically, we're going to focus on gas. Gas motors are a lot easier to start. They're a lot more efficient. It's cheaper fuel. It's also a little bit cleaner in my opinion too.
So the first tip would be to make sure you set up your airframe with the right components. You have to make sure you have the right fuel line, and then there's also a start switch and a kill switch, something like that.
Yeah, specifically for gas motors here, this runs off of an electronic ignition switch. So you actually have a separate battery feeding voltage, and that's timing the spark instead of like nitro where you have a glow plug that's on all the time. We need the ability not only to run the engine, but also to tell the engine to stop running. So we have 2 components here. We have a switch. That switch will actually turn on and you can apply battery voltage to the ignition module. We also have something called an optical kill switch. And what that does is it gives us the ability on our transmitter to be able to turn the ignition on and off. So if we set our fail-safes up and say we have it fly out of range or we have some kind of issue with our RF frequency, we can set it so the engine will automatically die and it won't just fly away.
With electric, you can just give it throttle and it starts, cut the throttle and
absolutely.
It stops.
You make your battery connection.
Not the case here.
Exactly. Once you connect the battery on an electric motor, you're good to go after it initializes. With this, you need to make sure you have a fuel line that can take gasoline, or it'll say gas and glow approved. Oftentimes it's yellow. In this case, we have this black fuel line, but it actually says for gas motors.
So what kind of thing would happen if you pick the wrong type of fuel line?
If you pick the wrong fuel line, basically what's going to happen, you're going to have it deteriorate. Sometimes it'll even swell where you think your motor's not working properly, but what's happened is the fuel line has swelled to the point where it's cutting off the fuel flow.
Okay.
And that causes it to run poorly.
So tip number 2 would be to make sure you use the right prop.
Yes.
Now I'm assuming that means that there's going to be a difference between what you would use for electric and what you'd use for a gasser.
100% yes. Yeah, if you think about this, with electric motors, they're very smooth. They start up very smooth. There's no impulse that actually is driving that motor forward. But with gas engines, you have the exact opposite. You have an explosion taking place that's driving that prop forward for the next rotation.
Okay.
And that happens time and time and time again. So what you'll notice oftentimes with electric props is they're very thin around the neck here. They're really designed for efficiency and they run very, very smooth. But you could never put something like this on it because what would happen is with those explosions, you would get a lot of deterioration on that neck. If you notice on the gas engine there, that it's a lot thicker around the main prop area. Now it doesn't mean that you can't find a plastic gas prop. Oftentimes you'll see carbon fiber, you'll see plastic, you'll see wood. What it does mean is you need to read the manual, you need to see exactly what they specify for your prop, and you need to use that. If it says it's approved for gas, it's approved for glow, and the pitch is the same, you're in good shape.
So tip number 3 would be to make sure you have the right fuel mixture. So you can't just go to the gas station and pump it full of unleaded.
Nope. Typically with a 2-cycle motor means that you have an oil mixed in with your gas, and that oil provides a couple things. It keeps the engine cooler, also provides really critical lubrication to make the engine last long and not seize up. Now every manufacturer is going to specify a difference, and also when you get a new engine, you don't just simply put in the fuel mixture that you're going to run the engine for the rest of life. There's something called a break-in. And we're going to actually, on this model here, we're going to be using 20-to-1 fuel to oil mixture.
So 20-to-1 fuel mixture means 1 part oil, 20 parts gas?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Also going beyond that, they're going to specify whether it's synthetic, non-synthetic. You know, they may have a special brand that they want you to use. Make sure you read that because there's a reason behind it. It's not just because they want to make you buy a certain oil. But once we get through the break-in period, we're actually going to go to 32-to-1, which means you're going to have more power, you're going to need less lubrication on the motor. It's also going to run a lot cleaner.
Tip number 4 is to make sure you have a proper break-in. So we're going to break in the engine
by
running the engine. without flying the plane.
In a certain way, yes, absolutely. Okay. And this is really where patience comes to matter in reading the manual. Every manufacturer is going to tell you a different way to break it in. This is the difference at this point between having a really great experience or you could have a really poor experience. When I was young, I was really impatient. I never broke in my engines right. So what happened is I bought used engines. I noticed that the used engines that I bought, specifically from people that were seasoned and patient, unlike me, those engines performed fantastic. And they lasted me a lot longer than the ones I bought brand new. And it all came down to the fact that I didn't break them in properly.
So how do we go about breaking in the engine?
Well, for this one specifically here, they're recommending running almost a gallon of fuel through at a 20-to-1 oil to gas mixture. Okay. One thing we're going to want here is we're going to want a firm place to fasten it down. We can actually keep the wings off of it, keep it open so we can make sure we can adjust our linkages and things like that. We're going to want to run a whole tank through without going over half throttle. So it's going to take a lot of patience, it's going to last a long time. After about 2 to 3 tanks, we can then start working above throttle, but at no point are we going to go full throttle more than a certain amount of time, all described out in the manual.
I don't want to go full throttle.
Because the extra heat that we're building up, it's going to cause issues.
Okay, explosions. Mm-hmm.
If you're really eager to fly this, at this point you could actually, after about 3 tanks, you could take it up in the air and cruise around, but you would not want to be flying too fast and overheat the motor.
Just do it right.
Yeah.
Read the manual. RTM.
One reason why they also recommend not going to full throttle too long while you're on the ground is because when you're flying through the air, you have a lot more airflow going over your engine as compared to doing a static run up on the ground. And even when you're flying in the middle of the summer and your engine's all broken in, you don't want to go ahead and do too much excessive idling without flying.
So for tip number 5, you want to exercise some safety when you're running up the engine.
Yeah, big time. This is really where having a buddy to help you through this process, especially if you're working with bigger gas engines like we have here. You know, get a buddy around to help you hold down the airplane.
Yeah, because you don't want it to take off prematurely.
At a minimum, tying down your tail is a necessity. But if you keep in mind that this prop is pretty big here, reaching around that prop, having to start it, having to work on it, it's a lot easier if someone's actually standing with their feet locked against the rear horizontal stabilizer, but also giving a couple more points of contact with their hands. Okay. One thing, if you have someone helping you, make sure you pull the plane all the way forward against the backs of their feet, because what will happen is if you start the engine and it comes forward, there's a good chance you could hit your fingers. Yeah, and speaking of fingers, you want to protect your hands at all costs. I recommend getting a very thick leather glove if you're ever going to be hand propping, but my preference is actually using an electric starter.
Now tip number 6, you want to make sure that you keep a clean, healthy plane.
If you clean your engine and you clean your airplane, it's going to last longer. And that's because the oil and the fuel mixture that kind of gets on the covering can easily soak into the wood, and when it does that, it's going to be hard to glue for repairs, the covering's not going to stick as well. And also, you want to make sure that you empty your tank after every flight. If you leave fuel in your tank, when you carry it around, especially if you carry it nose down, you could flood your carburetor, it could spill out, it's going to get messy for you. So make sure you empty out your tank after every flight, and in some cases the manufacturer may even recommend a after run oil to put in the engine just to make it last longer. If you listen to these tips, you're going to have an awesome experience and the engine's going to last forever.
I'm sorry, did I So that's it. Obviously, going into gassers is opening up a whole new world, so we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to learn a few things that'll help you out. The Ultra Stick is a great airframe. We're going to be using it a lot in the future for this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And one of the additional hopes is that we're going to be using this common power plant, the 33C Evolution engine, because actually it's very economical for its size. Plus, the gear that goes in this airplane can be switched to lots of other different airframes. Our goal is to fly the Ultra Stick for a while, switch it over to maybe a J3 Cub, and switch it to maybe a scale model, and show all the different unique experiences you can have with one motor and one power plant.
All right, everybody, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a single video. We'll see you all next time.
See you next time.